Very much. All right, so just some logistics. Everyone can hear me? Perfect, amazing. Cool, so I just realized today that this timing of the talk is actually could be one of the most dangerous timing for tech talk because you guys have been up since 9, right? You just had lunch, and then you're expecting me to entertain you and be more exciting than a nap for 40 minutes. Bold move, but let's see how it goes. So today, I'll be walking you in an in-depth security review that I've done for Signal. In the talk, we'll talk about how Signal works, privacy guarantees that you expect in Signal, and vulnerabilities that I found throughout the way. So the talk is divided into 3 parts. The first part is about just an intro about the security review style, what do I look at? And the second part is basically design Signal, how does it work, the cryptographic primitives, everything. And then the third part is the implementation details and where we start to see the vulnerabilities. But before that, I would like to introduce myself. So my name is Ibrahim. I am a security engineer. I've been a security engineer for the past 15 years. I'm the typical generalist security engineer that you can think of. I review code, I work with product teams to build scalable, secure systems, and I do vulnerability research, the typical general security engineer. I also have some skill set in static analysis, so I've built the static analysis at Meta, the main static analysis for security, and as of today, or based on last post, that detects around 50% of the vulnerabilities at Meta. But in 2018, I became very excited about and very interested in end-to-end encryption messaging applications. And that started when I was reviewing WhatsApp, the calling stack for WhatsApp. And I was very impressed by the power that you get from end-to-end encryption. And I also was very fascinated by the risk of zero-click attack surface. That and the high-profile attacks from NSO back then made me very excited to look more into more messaging applications. And that led the path to Signal. Before we start, just a little bit of a disclaimer. So this talk does not represent any of my employer, previous employers. This is purely my personal research. This also was a close collaboration with Signal. So that's consultants who work with Signal, and I work with the engineering team with Signal closely on that review. The talk focus completely on the technical parts. During the talk, I may compare different apps, but I will not mention any names of apps, just focusing on the technical parts. The names are irrelevant. So moving on, what to expect from the talk. So this is more on the security review side of the talk. This is not crypto analysis, not the crypto protocols. Many experts have done that research already. There are a lot of white papers and research that you can read about that. But this is a security engineering view of the talk. And as I mentioned, this is a close collaboration. Also, the talk is focused only on the one-to-one messaging applications in Signal, no groups and no calls, and focusing only the zero-click attack surface of Signal. Hopefully, by the end of the talk, you understand how Signal works, privacy guarantees from Signal and other messaging applications, and of course, some vulnerabilities. We are at Black Hat. Before diving in, there will be a lot of code in the second part of the presentation. I would love everyone to see it and be part of it. So if you'd like to move in a little bit closer, please do now. I don't think you'll be able to see it at the back of the room. So my methodology for security reviews is that usually I think of 4 layers when I review an application. So I think of the design, what systems are supposed to do, what the spec says, and then the intent, what the engineers understood from that design and what they intend to implement, and then the implementation, the code that the engineers have actually written to express their intent. And lastly, the execution, how the code behaves and the corner cases. At each layer, you can imagine there could be different security vulnerabilities, and each layer requires different skill set and techniques to find the vulnerabilities. Additionally, I break the reviews into 4, vulnerabilities into 4 classes. Language specific. If you're reviewing C++ code or C, you expect to see memory corruption. If you're reviewing application specific or looking at the application specific code, SQL injection, and others. So these are the different 4 categories that I look at. Keep these in mind throughout the review because we will touch across them as we explain as we dive into the Signal code base together. So with that, let's start and understand Signal architecture. And To explain how Signal works, I'll use an analogy similar to like physical mail. If you want to send a physical mail, the sender will write a letter, put it in an envelope, deliver it to a mailbox. The processing company or like the mail company will pick up the mail, route it to the recipient mailbox, recipient collect it, read the message. The envelopes here are red, which means that the messages are not end-to-end encrypted in the normal case. So the red denotes that the messages are not end-to-end encrypted. Signal works in a very similar fashion or model. So you basically, again, have Alice and Bob. Since we're talking about crypto, so we always should have Alice and Bob. And they write a message, they deliver it to the mailbox. Signal pick up the envelope, routes that into the recipient mailbox, read the message, the client picks up that from the mailbox and read the message. Usually Signal and messaging applications will have like a directory to look people up, so you can look people up by phone number, usernames, and also you know their name and their profile picture, so give you like good user experience. From this diagram, we can start to understand the attack surface. So there are some servers, there are some clients, typical application. The servers in Signal are mostly just Java and Rust, not a lot of C++, almost none, so very small attack surface. The clients, the cross-platform library is written in Rust, which I think Signal is one of the few applications where the library is written in Rust and not in other languages or memory unmanaged language. And the applications are for Android, Kotlin, and Java, iOS, Swift, and Objective-C, and desktop is an Electron app. The only thing to highlight here is the library is in Rust, and that means like the attack surface of memory corruption is usually minimal comparing to a full C or C++ library. Moving on, in terms of code size, the size of the server is around 300K, the size of the different applications between 300 to 500K. Based on my experience for apps that I have reviewed, decompiled, looked at, this is mostly on kind of the lower end in terms of size of these apps. So the app is very minimal, very lean, just have the main functionality. Usually this is between 40 to 60% less than other apps that I've decompiled or looked at from similar messaging applications. Last thing is that as you review a messaging application or end-to-end messaging application, we want to think about where the trust layers in that application. So one, in end-to-end messaging application, we should expect the server to be malicious. Well, we have to expect that, and we have to kind of start on top of that. So, and we should also expect the network as hostile. We expect the messaging application to protect the content of the message, and ideally the metadata around the message and the metadata around the people. Not all end-to-end messaging applications protect the metadata. Signal, we will see together how much it goes to protect that metadata. With that, we can start with the metadata, and we can start about profiles. So profiles. For every application, or for Signal, you have the information around the users, and similar messaging apps have that. So you have the person, their name, their profile picture, their status, any other plain text information. Signal claims that this information is encrypted end-to-end. And this is one of the parts that I started the review with. And in fact, the data is actually encrypted with something called the profile key. This profile key is generated on the client. It is never shared with the server. The data is sent to the server encrypted with that key, and the encryption is AES-256 in GCM mode. And the keys are only shared when you start a conversation with someone. And if someone starts a conversation with you, the key is only shared once you accept that conversation, so once you reply to that person. I tried different ways to leak the key and different techniques. I actually couldn't, and that was kind of the first part of the review. And if you look at the servers, and if you look at the code, so the server is also one thing to interest is that all clients in Signal are open source, and all servers are also open source. So you can read the code for the clients and read the code for the servers. So if you spin up the storage server locally, and you look at the profile data on the server, you see something like this. So on the top, you see Signal, where you have everything is encrypted, or just kind of a blob of bytes. And the bottom, you can see typical or traditional messaging application, where the data is actually in plaintext. One thing to do note, the image URL is encrypted, but also the image content behind that URL is also encrypted. Everything is encrypted with a profile key. The profile key is rotated only when you block someone. So theoretically, someone can monitor when the profile key changes and know that the user have done something, or blocking a user or other actions that kind of leak that some action happened, basically. But OK, now this is part of the metadata. Let's move into messages. So far, we did not explain how Signal kind of creates the end-to-end encryption. And so if we go back to this diagram, I'll keep the letters red, which means they're not encrypted. If the messages are not encrypted, of course, the server can open the envelope, read the content. There is no end-to-end encryption. In order to encrypt data between two users, what you want here is that the two users to agree a shared secret between the two users, and then they can start encrypting with that shared secret. Once we think of key agreement protocols, we always think of Diffie-Hellman. And to explain Diffie-Hellman in layman terms, assume that Alice and Bob agree on a common paint. They both select secret, or like they select a secret color. They mix that color with a common paint, and then they share the mixture over a public network or an unsafe network. The assumption here is that to reverse that mixture and to go back to the original colors, this is extremely difficult and theoretically difficult to do, and that's the case in public key cryptography. Once they receive the mixture, they mix their own secret colors, and now both have a shared secret across the users, between the two users. Signal uses elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman, and the keys that are shared called pre-keys. These keys are elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman keys, and they are ephemeral keys. They're only shared once to establish the session. Once the session is established, then the keys are, they just disappear. The keys are signed by a key called the identity key, and this is the most critical key for Signal because the identity key, the lifetime of that key is the lifetime of your account. As long as you have the account, it's the same keys, they're never rotated. They are only used to sign, they almost never leave the device from Signal. And so now Alice and Bob have shared secrets, and now they can encrypt messages. We go back to green envelopes. So this way that Signal cannot see the content of these envelopes. But what I explained so far, there is one interesting attack for that. So what if so both Alice and Bob have shared secrets. What if the server kind of always make a copy of the encrypted blobs, and at some point, the server or an attacker get access to the device. They can get the keys and they can decrypt all previous messages. This is known as backward secrecy. And what you want is that you want to build a system where even if the server that logged all the blobs or like the encrypted bytes, even if they get access to the device, they should not be able to compromise a previous conversation. And the solution for this is you ideally want to encrypt every message with a unique key. So the way that the Signal does this is that from the Diffie-Hellman key, it uses that as the chain key, that you don't encrypt messages with that. You run it into a key derivation function. It outputs two keys, message key and a chain key. You encrypt the message with a message key. You throw away the key after that. You delete it once the message is delivered, and then you generate another key. One mechanical way to interpret this, you can think of this as a ratchet. So every time you send a message, that ratchet moves one step. Every time you send a ratchet, that ratchet moves one step. So if the attacker compromises the device at any point, they cannot reverse the ratchet back. This is good, and this solves the problem of backward secrecy. But there's still another problem here. What if someone compromises my device now, they get access to that key or to that ratchet, and then after that, they monitor the network? The current design would allow them to, just because they have the ratchet, they can move the ratchet step by step and to decrypt all future messages. And this is known as future secrecy or post-compromise secrecy. And in Signal and a couple of other applications, the way to solve this is that you want, after some time, to throw away the ratchet and say, hey, I don't trust this ratchet anymore. I want to create another ratchet. And this is known as Diffie-Hellman ratchet, which is kind of, or a double ratchet protocol, which after some time you throw away the ratchet and you generate a new ratchet. Basically, when Alice pulls the kind of pre-keys from Bob, creates the ratchet, and then sends all messages to Bob. So that's the ratchet that we talked about. And after that, once Bob receives the messages and then Bob wants to reply, what Signal does, it throws away these ratchets, and then after that creates new ratchet, and then the conversation starts. So the ratchet change every direction as the ratchet gets updated as the message changes directions. All right, back to metadata. So we mentioned that Signal tries to kind of reduce the amount of metadata. Most of the envelope that you have seen, if you look closely, have two fields, the from and the to. The to is very important for the functionality because the server wants to know how to route that piece of information to the recipient. But the from, it would be great to delete that and not not let the server know who is communicating with who. So in 2018, Signal created a new feature, or a feature that's called sealed sender, or unidentified sender. And the way that it works, it actually takes the information, and then after that, it puts the information inside the envelope, encrypts it, and then that way Signal doesn't know who is sending the information to. They just see that this is an envelope that you need to deliver to Bob, and that's it. Cool, that's the design. That's how everything works for now. Let's dive a little bit into the implementation and actually understand how our different things are implemented. So let's start with the envelope. So the envelope is actually in the server, or like in the clients, is a protobuf. That protobuf has different fields. The first field is the source service ID, where the envelope is coming from. And then the destination service ID, where do I need to route this envelope. And then you have the content, all the encrypted content of the message. And then after that, you have the type. So in the sealed sender case, the source service ID should be null, and the server shouldn't know that information. All the fields that, other than content, are plain text, and this is what the Signal service knows. So let's look into that type. So, some quick technology check. Slides look right. So this should have been after the sealed sender, but just out of the 4 applications that I looked at, one application that implement this single and double ratchet protocol, and none of the applications that I've noticed actually implement encrypted profile or sealed sender. I only looked at applications that have more than 10 million users above, so I'm sure there are more other applications, but if there are any other applications that have more, that implemented all the feature, I would love to know that, so feel free to reach me out after this. Okay, now that was a bug, let's go back to the code. So what are the different types on the envelopes here? So the first is ciphertext. This is the typical Signal encrypted double ratchet message. And then you have a pre-key bundle. This is the first message the client sends to the other client. And you can think of this as a superset between the message encrypted with the double ratchet protocol and the keys that the client need to establish so they can decrypt this message. And then the third type is unidentified sender. This is, you can think of it as a superset between the ciphertext as well and some meta information or metadata that's encrypted about who sent that information. But I noticed that there is a plain text content. So what does this mean? Why do we need a plain text content envelope? And I went back to the design and the specs, and there's something called retry requests. And these retry requests says that in case that the client or the receiver receives a message that they cannot decrypt, they need to reply with a plain text content saying, hey, I cannot decrypt this message. This is the message ID. Please figure it out. Send me back the message. Let's reestablish the session. There is the protocol specifies what's going on here. So, okay, so there is one way that you can send a plain text envelope or an envelope that has plain text content, and that is for the context of retry messages only. This is expected, but what we expect that the clients to validate that code. So let's dive a little bit into the code together. This is iOS, and in iOS you see again the different cipher types. The whisper is the encrypted message blob. So if you unfold this, you see it takes the Signal message, decrypts it. This is great. The plain text, it takes the message, return it as it is, the decrypted function here. Okay, again, this is expected, but what is that encrypted, like what is the content? What's the type of the content? So this is another protobuf that can actually have 11 types, a message of 11 types. And what we expect for a plain text content to only have a decryption error message. So what we're expecting here is that once the message is returned, the client validates that for plain text envelope, there should only be decryption error message inside, nothing else. If we look at iOS, there is no check. iOS just takes the plain text envelope, and after that, execute and processes the message. And so if it's a data message, it will process that, and it will handle the incoming message. And this is the first vulnerability we have. So basically, iOS clients can receive plain text envelope from the server. So it expects the server, like this assumes the server is malicious, and the server can send plain text envelopes. It will receive these messages, process them, and it works. The impact here is that you can send data messages, so you can inject any message into any other thread or conversation. And you can also send other types. There are 11 types of messages, so you can send an edit message, which is existing messages. To visualize this, here's the server, sends a plain text message with different content other than the expected content, and that will be processed on Bob's device, and you would not get any notification from that. Okay, that was iOS. The fix for this is basically checks if the message has a decryption error. It checks two things. It should not have any other message, similar to what the spec expects, and if it has, and it has to be a plain text envelope as well. Okay, let's look at Android. So Android, these again, the different types of messages. The ciphertext, what we expect here, it takes a signal message, uses the signal protocol to decrypt it, and the plaintext returns that plaintext content as it is. Cool, let's see the code. So there is, in Android, there was validation. So basically it says that if this is, so this is a function that runs the validation before the message is returned. And it says that if this is a plaintext envelope, make sure that the error decryption is not null. So the error decryption messages is there. And it does other types of checks that says that make sure that you don't have other types, story message, edit message, but the code missed that data messages check. So, and this is the second vulnerability, is that in Android, you can send, the server can send, well, this is as it is for now is still a bug, because now we have a content, it's not necessarily a vulnerability, and the next slide will explain, but we have a content or an envelope that have two messages. It has a decryption error message and a data message at the same content. And we don't know how the execution would work. So the execution for Android, that's the order of the execution, where the Android parses, it's a when block, and parses the data message first and executes that. So the server can send a plain text content to Android clients, and still that would be processed. Unlike iOS, it's not all types of messages, just the data message, which the typical text message that you get in Signal, and again, that can inject any message in any current thread in Signal. Okay, the fix for that, very simple, check that the data message is not part of a plain text envelope. Moving on, so this is desktop, and the code for desktop, again, takes plain text, return that plain text. Desktop also checks, return that a flag that the envelope was not encrypted. We know that it's plain text envelope. And desktop checks if it was a plain text envelope, then make sure that you always have the error decryption. Very similar behavior to Android. If it does not have the error, decryption, the decryption error message, it will throw an error. But very similar to Android, this is still a bug, not necessarily a vulnerability, depending on the execution of the code, what function will be executed first. And in desktop, the execution order is actually different than Android, so they execute the error decryption message first, and then the execution continues. If you notice, these are if and not if else. So theoretically, you can, after you've completed the if, you can go into the other block. But I've reviewed all the code. All these ifs actually return inside. So practically, it's kind of an if-else condition here. So desktop was safe in that sense. So a recap of the vulnerabilities. Basically, Signal allows plain text messages only for specific error reporting cases. However, some clients fail to kind of enforce this, accepting actual text messages via the fallback path. This opened the door for malicious servers to inject messages. This also, you can play that a little bit in SIM swapping scenario, where you can authenticate as another user, and then you can send these messages, and that will go through the server as plain text messages. Moving on to another feature called linked device. Linked device is one of the features that is actually difficult to implement in end-to-end messaging applications, because if there is no end-to-end messaging, the server will have all the messages. Once you add a new device, the server will send the messages to the new device, and the two devices knows the state, and everything is straightforward. But in end-to-end messaging, there is no central part. Like, all the information is in one device, so there is a difficult problem of how to synchronize this data across your device. So there are two parts for this review. One is how you actually provision a linked device. That I'm not going to cover a lot. I'm going to focus on, assume you have provisioned an already linked device, how you synchronize these two devices. So let's start with the recipient path. So the recipient path, if Bob provisioned their desktop or iPad, when Alice sends a message to Bob, Alice asks the server, how many devices Bob have? And then the server says, Bob have 2 devices. So Alice goes establish a signal session between these 2 devices, and then sends the message twice to the 2 devices for Bob. This way, Bob will get the message twice, and the conversation is synced across the 2 devices. Okay, but on Alice's side, it's a little bit more complex, because Alice has sent a message from one device, and the other device doesn't know anything about this message. So the other device is not the same state as this device. And the way that Signal solves this is that there is an invisible conversation between these two devices. This conversation is still end-to-end encrypted using the same Signal end-to-end protocol, where Alice sent another message to itself saying, hey, I've sent a message to the other device or to this user, so update your current state. And these are known as sync messages or synchronization messages. They should be sent between a device to a device to update the current status here. So these use the sync-to-sync messages. They use end-to-end encryption protocol, the same exact protocol as if you're communicating with anyone, and the same path as one-to-one messages, and they are protobuf sync messages. So let's look at them. So yeah, this is the content. Remember, the envelope contained different content. So that's our envelope, and there's a type called sync messages, and this is where the sync messages come in play. So the sync messages have there are 22 types. So this is the sent. When Alice sent a message to someone, it sent a sync message of the type sent to the other device to connect it to make sure that both devices are in sync. And when you read the message from one device, you send a read message to the other device to maintain the configuration, to maintain the state. And lastly, the configuration message. When you update the typing indicator on one device, or you update the read receipt on one device, one of your devices sends the update configuration to the other device to make sure that you have synchronized updates between both of them. But clients, in order for clients to process these messages safely, they need to do two things. The first one is that the clients should make sure that the messages are encrypted first, no plaintext envelopes. And remember, in iOS, the first bug, in iOS, the code accepted any type of content. So the server could have sent a sync message as well as a plaintext content. But that is fixed now. So let's focus on the second part, which is validate sender itself. So for sync messages, you always want to validate that this came from myself. It didn't come from any other user. So with that, let's jump into the code. So this is Android. This is the handle incoming envelope function, and it receives a sync message. And the first thing that it does, it actually checks that the message is coming from my other account or my self account. OK, that's what we're expecting to see here. This is desktop, handle sync message, JavaScript code or a TypeScript code. And you can see also the check here, the message have to come from oneself. And this is the code for Android. There are validations, but there is no validation that states where the message is coming from. And this is the third bug that we have today. So the vulnerability here that there was a missing authorization or validation check on sync messages. This only affected Android, and it allows attackers to send sync messages end-to-end. This is zero-click. This did not require malicious server or anything. This is a normal end-to-end message between two users. In the exploit, I was not able to read previous messages, but I was able to send the different type of sync messages to edit, inject a message, and and update the configuration. This was patched immediately once discovered, exactly the same day. This was patched also in September 2024. Signal clients have a force update after 3 months. So after 3 months, all clients have to force update, otherwise they don't work. So I don't believe there are any kind of vulnerable clients as of today. To visualize this, finally we bring Mallory to the party. So Mallory sends a sync message end-to-end encrypted. The server cannot see anything. Everything is end-to-end encrypted. The message looks very normal as a message that you send to the user. And Bob's client, in case it's Android, it will actually process this and process that control message and change the state of the application. And now we can go to a demo. So. Sorry. So in the demo here, you can see, I'm not sure how easy it is to see, but this is the configuration message or the sync message, and this is the desktop, the phone, and you can see in the phone, this is the read receipt we're on. And as I just send the message, the read receipt status now will change, so probably get an error. But if you look at the read receipts now, so that changed to false. And the sync message was just to sync the configuration from true to false. You can still do more. You can inject messages. You can do all other types of messages. But yeah, that's to change the configuration on one device. Let's go back to the slides. All right, so these are all the types of sync messages that you can send. Again, sent, which will inject a message into a conversation. Contacts, which update the contact list. Mark a user as a verified. Edit will edit a message. And yeah, there are 22 messages. There's also, I think, a way where you can leak if two users have been communicating or not together via the sync messages. Sorry. All right, this is the fix. The fix is very simple. Just make sure that you check that the sync messages are coming from our self-identity. And so vulnerability recap, when you have linked devices, your devices synchronize the state via an invisible conversation between them. It's end-to-end encrypted. The conversation uses special type, which sync messages, and the vulnerability is that was Android clients accepted sync messages not validating from anyone, not validating the identity of that. This also affects Android clients even if they don't have a linked device, because the code just there and the code will execute. One of the downstream clients of Signal was Whisperfish. They also were affected by this vulnerability because the vulnerability is not in the protocol, it's just in the client, and they fixed that with a CVE, and the CVE score was 8.5. What else did I review? So I looked at all kind of language specific. There was no memory corruption issues, even in the unmanaged code for Rust. I looked at the JavaScript. I was excited to find any prototype evolution or anything related to JavaScript, but it actually was really very well written. Nothing application specific. I literally reviewed every single SQL injection query in the application. All looked good, so there is nothing there. The only two vulnerabilities, as I mentioned, the vulnerabilities were between logic-based and product-specific. And this aligns very well with what I expect, because as applications mature and as they have a higher quality, the vulnerabilities tend to disappear from language-specific application, and they go more into the logic-based and product-specific. That's it. So yeah, it's a security engineering review from Signal. It was a close collaboration between, again, the Signal team. Big kudos to them for supporting me throughout that. I hope you have a clear understanding of how Signal works, some of the privacy guarantees that you expect and you get from messaging applications, and you've seen some of the vulnerabilities that I found throughout the review. Big thanks to everyone here, and I think we have 7 minutes for questions.